championing Africa through solidarity, equality, and sustainability.
It is exactly 15 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time as we go into our weekly G20 feature. Now, one of South Africa's G20 priorities is supporting small-scale farming through initiatives such as increased investment, climate resilience, digital innovation, and inclusive market participation. This afternoon, as we co-host this conversation, along with the National Pulse, hosted this afternoon by John Gericke of SAFM, we focus on some of the challenges faced by small-scale farmers, and these are limited access to finance, land, and technical support. Now, the working groups have called for tailored solutions for both women and the youth. John, certainly these are such pertinent issues, and as the G20 proper draws closer and closer on the 22nd and 23rd, these are sure to have very solid pillar inputs into the way ahead.
Yeah, and we also hope that these continue. It's not just a talk shop, and that some of our small-scale farmers will be able to experience this and make a better living, and obviously with doing that, be able to supply food. Let's talk to Jimmy Gotjana. He's the co-facilitator of the Civil C20 South Africa Working Group in Poverty Alleviation and Food Sustainability. Jimmy says that small-scale farmers contribute significantly to the growth and development of economies, that measures are needed to ensure that arable land is used to the benefit of the population. Joins us on the line now.
Jimmy, a very good afternoon to you. Welcome to SAFM and Africa in a Business on Channel Africa. Let's go straight into the type of policy changes that are being proposed or have been adapted to support small-scale farmers in South Africa and by the G20 member states. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you very much, Thami. Thank you very much to John as well as the viewers. And thank you for having me.
Yes, please do go ahead. We're asking about the policy changes that have been adopted and that are needed in order to be able to support small-scale farmers on the South African continent and indeed in South Africa as well.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think I must start by saying that as a working group which was responsible for poverty alleviation and food sustainability, we've looked extensively into key policy proposals that support small-scale farmers. One of those that has to look at hinges on the issue of capacity development and training of the small-scale farmers. As you know, that the small-scale farmers need to be nurtured so that they are made readily to produce and be capable, business owners. The issue of financing and market access, I think it's something that the policy will look at, because I think the view is that the small-scale farmers must help to increase productivity and income and contribute to poverty reduction. So these are some of the areas that we've looked at through this rigorous, widely consultative and interactive, inclusive process that makes sure that we have engaged everyone, not only in South Africa, but global South and North. They were involved in the deliberation of these key policy changes or proposal.
Jimmy, how do you view the role of international trade and global supply chains in helping alleviate poverty and ensuring food sustainability?
Yeah, you see, John, the issue of poverty and food sustainability are closely linked, and addressing one often requires tackling the other. So you cannot miss, both, elements. So government, we are of the view that government should create an enabling and conducive environment for building international development cooperation. And we're saying this because sustainable development is key to reducing poverty as they contribute to SDG 1. As you know, that SDG 1 looks at no to poverty, and SDG 2 looks at zero hunger. So the issue of promotion of bilateral trade investment arrangement in countries is something that should be looked at and be encouraged by government. In that way, we'll be able to reduce the bottlenecks on international trade as well as the global supply chains. Yeah, and it will help in alleviating poverty as well as ensuring food sustainability.
Now, Jimmy, when we look at the role that small-scale farmers play, they produce 30 to 80% of food in many developing countries and often forming the backbone of global food supply. And when we look at small-scale farmers, youth, women, and those who are, granted and classified within those marginalized groups, how are they being included in the draft policies, especially considering the fact that small-scale farmers are not formal members of the G20, but they certainly do play a strategic and indispensable role?
Yeah, the development of this policy proposal, I think, has been a widely consultative and inclusive, process. So we have ensured that not only the small scalers that should be involved in this policy, development, but I think it should involve all sectors of the communities. By that, it implies that youth, women, as well as the vulnerable groups, the people with disabilities, persons with disabilities, as well as LGBTQI, these are all key sectors which we think are very, very critical, because I think they should play a role in the development of this policy, and not only in the development, but I think they should own this process as agents of change in all the communities. So we've ensured that we consult widely, because at the end of the day, this process must be owned by everybody within our communities.
You highlight some of the issues or some of the challenges that these small scale farmers are facing. 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 of them. Can you run through those for us?
Yeah, look, one of the biggest barriers or risk that we've identified, I think, is first of all non-committal from government, as well as the private sector. I think this process, we've ensured that the business or the private sector should constitute a core to the 14 engagement groups, so that they could add value. So I think we're of the view that they should play a critical role in the issue of non-committal. The slow pace in policy development by government is one of the barriers. Government not creating a space for engagement, making the process non-exclusive. We are of the view that government should open the space for social dialogue process. I think the lack of trust deficit between government and some communities is something that needs to be looked at very seriously, because everybody is crying loud to say that government, the social distance between government and people is widening. So we hope by this policy, working in close collaboration between government, the communities, and business, in something similar to NetLeg, it will help in enhancing and realizing the objective that we want to achieve.
You mentioned there, Jimmy, the importance of collaboration and working together and being seen as one system. We also do know that there are inequalities that exist within countries, inequalities that exist between countries. So how is the working group addressing these inequalities in the context of food systems and food infrastructures and food poverty?
Yeah, in this instance, I think we are of the view that concerted efforts should be employed, not only by government, but by international development partners. It should be a collaborative, engagement process that will involve government, international development partners, your philanthropists, funding agents, because I think without funding, it will defeat the whole purpose. So we want to bring all the critical stakeholders to the table so that they understand the intricacies and some of the, the barriers which are experienced by the small-scale farmer. Not only that, but also to ensure that they help in reducing the issue of poverty, alleviation, as well as the inequalities that are experienced in all our communities. But all what we are saying that we should not leave no one behind is that pledge we are subscribing to, that pledge that we don't want to leave anyone behind. And I think we want to encourage that notion to everybody who's involved in the development of this process.
Thami, I got a couple of questions here. The one I want to talk about is funding. We can talk about all of this till we're blue in the face, Jimmy, but in the end, you need to buy tractors. You need to be able to buy seeds and fuel and those kind of things. Where does all the funding come from this?
As I was saying that I think this process, has been very inclusive. It has been inviting prospective, infected as well as affected parties. So in this instance, we are hoping that, government, will play a critical role to support this initiative. But not only that, the private sector, the development agencies, the state-owned entities, the philanthropists, all these bodies will play a critical role to ensure that they assist not only for the seedlings and that, but also infrastructure. You'll find that in some areas, the roads, they cannot be passed, by the small scalers. The tractors can't operate, the bakkies, they can't work or they can't run or drive. You can't drive a, tractor on a road that is not been repaired. So these are some of the issues that need to be looked at. But at the center, government should be playing a critical role with bringing other stakeholders that will ensure that they sustain the development that will be experienced by the community. Yeah.
Jimmy, I did mention earlier on that small-scale farmers are not recognized as a standalone within the G20, yet they are represented by the ministers of agriculture, the G20 agricultural ministers meetings. That's where they are being represented. I wonder why it is that they are forming part of the Civil 20, the C20 working group, and is there going to be, and is there communication between yourselves as the C20 and the agricultural ministers meeting to ensure that there's congruency between what comes out of these conversations and meetings?
Yeah, I think the issue of sustainable agriculture, which will look at practices like agroforestry, regenerative agriculture, as well as integrated pest management. These are some of the issues that we are of the view that they promote soil health, crop yields, and they improve food availability, which is experienced in the ecosystem services. So all these issues, they talk to the Department of Agriculture. So definitely, even though we are not party to such negotiations or engagement with those critical stakeholders or high level, but we're of the view that the C20 political declaration, which will be presented, will highlight some of the key interventions that we are proposing. And I think one of them is to say that those stakeholders, which are playing a critical role in the ecosystem, of everybody, should be brought on board. So we're of the view that Department of Agriculture, Land and Rural Development, all these critical stakeholders, will be brought on board. Your agri-SETA as well, they play a critical role. If you talk of corporate development, you talk of SETAs, the agri-SETA must be brought on board so that they support their such initiative for the betterment of these stakeholders.
Mr. Jimmy Gotjana, thank you very much for your insight this afternoon. He's the co-facilitator of the Civil 20, that's the C20 South Africa Working Group on Poverty, Alleviation and Food Sustainability, and the national convener for the Alliance of NPO Networks, known as ANET. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, John. John, I guess that's how we come to the end of our conversation for this afternoon. But I tell you what, I wonder if the ministers of agriculture shouldn't actually themselves be part of meetings of this nature. I mean, if I hear Jimmy well, they're not. And already there is a distance and a chasm that has to be filled. And the only means of communication of what comes out from these small-scale farmer concerns is going to be the declaration which they then submit to, quote-unquote, the powers that be.
And then will it continue as well? Yeah, there's a lot of criticism about these things just being big talk shops and everybody just gets together and it sounds great. But if we have another meeting in 5 years' time, will the small farmer be able to say that their life has improved? That's part of the challenge as well.
It has to be sustainable and it has to be impactful. John Gericke, it's been a pleasure. Have yourself a good one.
Thami and Ngubeni, thank you.
Thank you. That is how we come to the end of our G20 feature for this afternoon between Channel Africa's Africa in Business and SFM's The National Pulse. It's exactly
G20
29
in
minutes
Africa.
after 4.
Exclusive to Channel Africa. Champion.